unfortunately, we didn't see this in the other countries in the Western Balkans, because when you look this through the glasses of NATO, for example, a combination of eastern flank and southeastern flank is definitely combined. So I think that cooperation on this axis from north till southeast is extremely important. Unfortunately, for example, Bosnia and Herzegovina didn't get a status so far. We were very supportive to this idea, because for the Croatian national interests is the fact that the countries in the Western Balkans are going on the right direction. I was serving in Serbia almost 3 years, so I see that there is a strong support for the EU enlargement process, but on the other side, the country is still under the influences of the big players out of the European Union. Again, I just want to stress once again, it's up to Europe, to European Union, to show that the option of the membership in the EU is the best one, and I strongly believe that this is the case. Back to Croatia, and because the topic was named, it was based on our policy and where do we stay regarding the current situation, democracy and peace. We are now developing some very important issues to the energy diversification on one side and to the food supply on the other side, because our geostrategical position is that we are combining Danube and Mediterranean, and on the other side we are combining Central Europe with Southeastern Europe. We started with LNG terminal on the island Kirk. The echo in Germany, for example, is excellent, because it's definitely in line with what Germany is now trying to do with diversification of the energy supply, and we will offer this to the countries in the Western Balkans and Central Europe. We'll try to protect also this LNG through the pipelines direction Serbia and direction Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's up to the huge interest from those countries to see diversification of the energy supply. Again, this is our strategical interest in Croatia, to have stable, pro-European, pro-Western situations in our neighborhood. This is the food supply is absolutely something what we could offer to countries in Central Europe, but also in Ukraine regarding our positions on the Adria Sea. It's about Rijeka, the port of Rijeka. So the calculation is the port of Rijeka is the closest port to Central Europe, and now Croatia is trying throughout these cooperations with Slovenia, with Austria, with Germany, to establish very good network. This is the point in the geographical position of Croatia, and I'm very much glad that we managed to establish excellent cooperation with Slovenia. There is many long-standing open issues there regarding the border between Croatia and Slovenia, but two countries who are the members of the European Union and NATO have decided to set aside this issue, to tackle this issue in the future, to be active, but also to maintain and develop excellent cooperation on the good neighborhood situation. Back to the region and to the Western Balkans. Namely, we see very important that Germany is again engaged in the Western Balkans. That this new government of Germany, Chancellor Scholz, is willing to continue with so-called Berlin process. And the Berlin process, how we see in Croatia, is very much linked nowadays to all of the European policies to be implemented in the Western Balkans. This is the strongest link between EU and Western Balkans regarding energy, regarding digitalization, regarding environment, etc. So Germany is again very much engaged, and I gotta say that it's so nice to see now excellent cooperation between the United States and Germany and European Union. I think after so many years with situations which are not very rosy between Europe and the United States, now we see that countries, especially in Quinta is cooperation between Germany, French side, UK, Italy, United States is still on board by coordinating their policies not only in the Western Balkans but also in the other corners. So Berlin process basically was initiated by by Angela Merkel in 2014 in order to see cooperation between the Western Balkan states, in order to see the European values but also cooperation within themselves. Croatia and Slovenia have established also Brdo-Briuni process as two countries from the region who are already in the EU and in the NATO, in order to also show as an example to the other countries that some open issues could be tackled down through good neighboring cooperation, through the regional cooperation, through business, through energy, to see whether instead of having all the time open issues, to see real concrete cooperation in many areas. And I can tell you that the European funds are definitely standing on the disposal of those countries to make transition, to make democracy, but as we always said, to tango. The countries in the region, they need to make their own reforms in order to continue on the same path. We see the different situations. We see, unfortunately, that in Serbia, especially in Republic of Srpska in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there are some tendencies to sit on the two chairs. We believe that the countries who are willing to join the European Union needs to adapt and adjust their foreign and security policy with the European one. And this would be a very strong message from the other countries, and from our point of view, this is our national interest to prevent this very fragile region from the hybrid situations regarding misinterpretations and being open and fragile when it comes to the influences of the other countries. I want to say a few words also about maybe global issues. You do understand that there is a big, we'll discuss about this issue maybe later on and throughout the dialogue and open and questions and answers. I think the very big responsibility will be to make transition from G7 cooperation to G20 cooperation. We are aware of the fact Croatia is not participating, of course, in those formats, but we are following this situation. We got to boost multilateralism. This is the best response to aggression, to protect the principle of international law, to see many countries on board from the other countries, from global south, from South America, Africa, and Asia. It's not easy because all of those countries in the regions have their own situations and problems, but somehow also within the United Nations framework, we have to have kind of a cooperation and common issue when it comes to those principles who are the base of United Nations. So this is very important, and we strongly support all of the ideas to see multilateralism and United Nations on board. This is not going to be easy, but I'm asking myself whether we have another option. What is alternative? I don't see any alternative for the time being. We got to be very clear to show that the changings of the borders, the territorial integrity must remain as a pillar of our societies. No matter the fact that we are living in Africa, Asia, South America, Europe, this is absolutely necessity, and it's quite obvious that single countries cannot solve those issues on their own basis. We got to have solidarity between our countries. It's good to see Egypt on the board. It's good to see that India is willing to reconsider their positions. It's so important to see that Brazil being active. And this is, from my point of view, something which we need to definitely strongly revitalize. I will finish with conclusions regarding West. This is a chance for us to show in this very hard momentum for all of our countries in upside downs, in absolutely unique situation after Second World War, that European Union and our values are still strong, still attractive. The best possible news came from Sweden and Finland, who decided to join NATO, because NATO is not only a military organization, but the organization of values. It showed that we are resistant, but on the long run, until the end of the year, we have to show resilience. It's going to be not an easy situation for Europe in order to organize and secure energy supply for all of our citizens, and I think that we got to stay united and in a very good way present those goals to our citizens. This is going to be a very huge challenge, but also throughout current positions and throughout solidarity on the European level, and in cooperation with the United States, but also the other partners all over the world, we can show our resistance and our ability to protect our national interests, all of our interests, in order to secure peace, stability, freedom, and territorial integrity of our countries. Now, I'll stop here and I'll be ready to discuss with you about everything what is from your point of interest, and later on also to run the dialogue in the panel. Many thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for this very comprehensive and specific overviews of the major issues, threats and problems, as seen particularly also under the aspect of Croatia's foreign policy as a member of the European Union. We have, I think, around 10 minutes time for an interactive discussion, questions and answers, and I will take the requests for your statements in the order in which I get it. Just one general observation concerning the future way of Europe. The question is, as you said, that of a cohesive and unanimous position of Europe, of the European Union states. In that regard, there seem still to be differences about the right way to go. For instance, Hungary would not go along with this massive policy of sanctions. And as far as I can see, I'm from Austria, the people, the popular opinion, people, the electorate, to a large majority do not endorse or do not support the policy, this massive policy of sanctions, because many people are afraid, and this is also the question, in what sense coercive measures adopted by the European Union are making sense in certain respects, and that's the worry of many people, when the sanctions have more detrimental effects, at short term at least, on the population of those countries that impose the sanctions than they have on the other side. The question is whether this is a means of resolving a conflict in an efficient and ultimately sustainable way, when the support, the local support, is eroding. And that's at least what we see in some European countries where we have open debate and an open, free and open society. And the question is how the leadership of the European Union, in particular the European Commission, will address these issues. Because if they are adopted, and they are very serious, they are coercive measures which make the European Union member states, in one way or the other, parties to a conflict, to an armed conflict. In what sense can those measures be upheld, or should they not better be adapted? It seems there is some flexibility, because Germany did ask Canada to make an exception from the sanctions. so that they can get at least one of their pipelines running. And if an exception is made, that is an indication of flexibility, and that is an indication that the governments in Europe are worried about hurting themselves, at least in short term, more than they would hurt the other side. And hurting the other side, by the way, by these massive sanctions, according at least to our European values, which we proclaim to be the guiding principles for the policies of the European Union, if we adopt such coercive measures against another party that are meant also to punish not only the government but the population, in the hope that the population somehow would distance itself from the government's policy of war, it is, if such measures are adopted, they must be precise, and they must lead to results, and they must not be counterproductive. Otherwise, it may be difficult to justify this in terms not only of statesmanship, but also in terms of moral credibility of Europe, because Europe should not be seen by the wider world, and I mean here Africa, Asia, not only the Slavic world. We should not be seen as countries that engage in collective punishment through such very comprehensive, sharp, and punitive economic sanctions. That is, for me, one of the challenges for Europe in the present constellation, and I wonder what Croatia, as a country that is neighbor of a country that aspires to join the EU, and that is now facing a real dilemma between Russia and Europe. I wonder what Croatia, as a country that has direct experience through this neighborhood, would advise, what advice Croatia would give to the European community, European Union.
Many thanks, Mr. Professor. You rightly mentioned some of the very sensitive and delicate issues in the European Union. We are all aware of the fact that sanctions are not an easy case, not an easy policy. I was dealing with those issues in my previous capacity as a political director, and I understood and I learned from the very beginning that policy regarding sanctions are the most delicate policies in the European Union. And I think that it's quite important, I already mentioned, to reach out partners out of Europe. Namely, we all have sometimes tendency in European Union to be focused exclusively, totally and fully on ourselves. We have to work with the other countries in Africa, in Asia, in Indo-Pacific, etc. This is not easy. And we have to help African countries, for example, regarding food and regarding current situation. So we might mild this situation with the sanctions in our countries by cooperating with the others, by reaching out to the countries out of the European Union, which is definitely not an easy case. The big game is definitely cooperation between China and the United States. And I think that Russia is making a big mistake if they think that they could solve or make their life easier by cooperating with China. And I think that Russia, in cooperation with China, is even not the junior partner anymore. So I think that it's not easy. The big effort and challenge for our countries is to present to our own public and people possible shortages in food supply and in energy supply. But on the other side, of course, we have to be very dedicated. The goal of the sanction is not to harm ourselves. This is not the goal of the sanctions. And we got to make a good balance, but on the other side, stress and deliver strong political message to Russia. I think that also we can change ourselves. I think talking about Croatia, Croatia has on their disposal from the European Union through Repower EU, through Fit for 55, really fantastic opportunities and funds in order to develop green energy, etc. We can use it, and maybe this is the good option to the countries in the Western Balkans. Because I think that situation in Serbia is not easy at all, bearing in mind that the Russians are practically having all of the energy sector in our neighboring country. It's almost similar situation is in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So let's use the current situation in order to change ourselves, to develop some new energy potentials in energy supply, and maybe we can change. Like in Germany, they are now through this situation, they're trying to change themselves, to make, to push or to expedite new policies in the energy, in the green energy. This is something what we are advocating. I'm personally advocating that through concrete European projects in the Western Balkans, people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Kosovo, Serbia, North Macedonia, Albania, they will understand that they might, in a much easier way, make their own transformation. It's not easy, but maybe this is the biggest warning now. Let's use this situation to change ourselves, to cooperate together, and to be linked to the European Union. Everything else is very risky, and it's a challenge for my country to see instability in our neighborhood.
Is there any question from, please, Prime Minister Bagration?
Yeah, very interesting to understand and to know if there are some research in Europe, generally, and in Croatia especially, that did you calculate when you will be cut from the supply of gas energy resources?
Maybe.
What will be the cost? Okay. It's okay. Yeah. What will be the cost of such a replacement? In what percentage in Europe or in Croatia the production cost will go up, which will bring to the reduction of the general production of GDP? Because Russia said, for example, a couple of days ago, within first 5 months of this year, they earned, despite of sanctions against the Russian energy resources, they earned 5 times more than a year ago. They started to sell gas and oil to the other countries, particularly India and new big consumer and China. Do you have any calculation to understand what is going to happen with the economy in Croatia, in Europe? Or what will be the concrete consequences in terms of percentage these sanctions against your economy? I would like to understand if there are some researches on that.
Well, definitely there are, and Mr. Prime Minister, your question is how we say $1 million question. It's for the time being totally unpredictable, and we cannot clearly voice and say that what is going to be on in the second half of 2022. In terms of Croatia, basically the GDP growth is on the right side, good side. When it comes to the energy, we have our own supply and we have our own LNG. Our concern is basically in Croatia very much on the economical situation in Germany, for example. We are much more exposed in a negative terms. A risk is the current development, for example, in the big European countries. this might affect our situation in Croatia, not our domestic situation. We are a relatively small country, very much based on the services, tourism. Tourism is, by the way, we have a record season, the best season since many years, because of our geographical position. People are not willing to travel to fly, but also rather go by car. But when it comes to the energy supply, our concern is the neighboring countries in Southeastern Europe and in Central Europe. So the goal of our LNG is to support the other countries, to make diversification. So it's not going to be an easy year for us, but our major concern are the energy prices all over Europe and current situation, for example, in Germany. Because if Germany is in the problem, we will all see huge consequences. Germany is partner number one for Croatia in economy, in trade, one of the biggest investors in tourism, etc. Those are the risk situation. But on the other side, we have decided to join the Eurozone. I think this is a chance for us because it's, in a way, better protection and also better guarantee for investors. So again, to the position of Croatia, it doesn't seem very negative for the time being. The current risks are under control. Predictions are relatively okay when it comes to the inflation and the GDP, but nobody can envisage what will be happening in some of the biggest economies in Europe. This will be from the biggest importance for Croatian economy and for the small economies around big European countries, Italy, Germany, and of course, France.
Is there any other request for the floor? If I do not see any hand raised, I thank the ambassador very cordially for his presentation, and we shall proceed with the second part of our session, and I will hand over to Dr. Didem Aydurmuş.
Let us first express our gratitude once again to the ambassador.